Okay, now that we're live, um, how did you start your military career? How did you decide that okay, this is the path that I'm going to follow. I'm going to join the military. This is what I'm going to do. How did you decide that?
Well, I needed a career and I needed something that would help pay the bills. I was working at an appliance store called Sears at the time, and it just wasn't enough to kind of pay the bills. And me and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, were having serious talks of starting a family, getting married and doing all that stuff. And she was like, you need something that pays the bills a little better than this, and we need benefits, healthcare, and all that stuff. So um, she suggested I look towards the military, and we went and talked to some recruiters. My brother-in-law, who wasn't my brother-in-law yet, but my brother-in-law at the time was in the Air Force. So I called him and I just said, "Tell me the truth, the pros and cons of service and what it's like," because I knew nothing. I had
Uh, uh,
had
how
family.
old were
Listen,
you at that stage?
20, almost 21.
Okay,
So when I signed the
okay.
papers, I was 20, about to turn 21, and then when I went
Mm.
in, I was 21. So I got advice from him. I signed the papers. I got a guaranteed job, and then I left in April of 2005 for active duty on the Air Force.
Mm. Okay, and then why did you decide to join the Air Force especially? Is it only because of your brother-in-law at that time, or was it some kind of thing that were appealing to you? Uh, why did you say, what did you say is the kind of thing that drawn you towards it?
Well, I would say that a big part because of my brother-in-law. He knew a lot
Mm,
about the Air Force, and he was like really the one person I knew at the time who knew a lot about one particular branch of service. So
mm,
that had a big part in it. Um, I had intentions of going and seeing the Air Force, then the Navy, then the Army, and then the Marine Corps, kind of in that order. And I said,
mm,
I'm going to stop when I've heard what I like to hear, and I'm going to go with my gut. And we talked to the Air Force. I talked to my brother-in-law some more, and I just didn't feel an inclination to go talk to anybody else.
good.
In a way, I kind of regret it. I wish I would have at least went and talked to the Navy, but um, looking back on it now, I heard what I needed to hear from the Air Force, and I pulled the trigger on it, and I'm more than happy that I did.
Okay. And then, how long did you serve? How long did you join the Air Force for? And how would you say that kind of experience formed your life?
So I did 12 years, and then they medically retired me because I had broken back and I had broken shoulders that needed repaired, and it was to the point where I couldn't function the way that I needed to
Mm,
at their level and their standards. I could still do my job, and I was at a rank where I wasn't physically doing my job. I was more of like administrative work.
mm,
But at the time, the Air Force didn't see the process like that, so they just said, you're starting to become unfit for duty. It's best that we part ways, and it is what it is. Um, it changed me as an individual, as an American, as kind of a patriot. It kind of gave me that sense of pride in country that I didn't have um, prior to joining. And not that I
mm,
didn't have it, but it was just kind of like I think it gave me a different level of it, a different
mm,
respect for country and the freedoms that we
mm,
enjoy, and not to mention the it's okay to have a difference in opinion. I served with a lot of different people, people with different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, different backgrounds. Like I helped several of my troops become American citizens because they were from different countries and came here. So I understood um, the other side of immigration and kind of the necessity for it on their side of things. So it really broadened me, I think, as a human and as an individual to understand that there's a whole different world out there, and it's not just necessarily a one-sided view of things. And it's okay to have difference in opinion because I served with a lot of people who didn't agree with the same things that I did. But at the end of the day, what we agreed on was the mission and taking care of business and all that. So it was a humbling and a very broadening experience, and one that I'm sure, as other people have said that came on here, have said that it was 100% a great decision, and it
mm.
changed my life.
Okay, then how did the injuries that you've occurred or suffered, how did that happen? How did you break your back and your shoulders? Was it on duty or?
Yeah, so it was my back and my shoulders were both on duty. I pushed a lot of cargo, so and my job was logistics, specifically in the medical field.
Mm,
And at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, we were pushing a lot of cargo out the doors. A lot of medical supplies was going out. So we marshaled a lot of cargo and helped get loaded on aircraft. And I was just pushing and pulling and all that, and loading and picking up and all that was just it was really hard on your body. And no matter how safe we tried to be, like we wore back braces, we tried to buddy lift and use forklifts and heavy equipment and all that stuff. Like the amount of times that we were doing it and just the ops tempo just wore on me to the point where um, it was just problematic. Like my left shoulder was accidental because we were unloading pre-packed medical kits that we were then packing with other supplies and sending to Afghanistan. And there's like a 200-pound boxes, and it was like stacked way too high. The manufacturer stacked them high for some reason. So in order to get them off of this big pallet, we basically put a forklift with a pallet, like 6 foot high, and then we kind of wiggled
mm,
them off and let them fall onto this wood pallet, and then we'd lower them to the ground. Because like I said, they were like 200 pounds. And um, one of them tipped over and hit the pallet and then kind of started tipping towards me. Well, I pushed one of my troops out of the way, and my left hand was like this. And then the pallet kind of hit my left hand, and all that weight went right on my shoulder unassisted, and it just heard a crack. And I knew it was bad. I tore my rotator cuff like almost all the way through, and the labrum that goes through on the side holds it all in there. Like all that stuff was torn apart. So that was early on in my career. I still did push-ups and fitness tests, and I continued to work because nobody could figure out what it was until I was almost done with that.
yeah, okay. And how many kind of injuries do you think happens, I would say, outside of the field of combat, but inside of the logistics part? Do you think there happens a lot of injuries, almost like the ones that you've suffered as well?
Yeah, I think it probably happens more often than we believe it does, just because, especially back then when we were constantly busy. Like our whole job was reach back and supporting the theater hospitals, because it was so busy back then.
Mm,
Um, Not that we were cutting corners or anything, but like we were doing a lot of work. So that's a pretty heavy toll on your body when there's a lot of
mm,
physical labor involved. And it wasn't just my job. There's people on the flight line working maintenance that were working long hours. And um, I think just the nature of the job, it's a very demanding physical job. So injuries happen all the time. I didn't see a ton of injuries because we were usually pretty safe, but you don't know what it does to your body over time. You have those long-term injuries. That's kind of what happened to me. Like my back and my other shoulder and my knees are just they're bad because of all the stuff we had to do, and it just
mm.
took a toll over time.
Okay, then how old are you now then?
I just turned 40 actually,
Okay.
so um, I joined when I was 21 and I just turned 40.
Okay, and do you think the kind of physical toll that it had on your body then is still affecting you now, or do you think you've recovered completely and are able to live, I would say, a kind of normal life for a 40-year-old?
Um, I definitely haven't recovered. Like my back's still messed up. I still have fractured discs, and the only thing that fixes that is disc replacement or fusion. So
Mm,
um, I just do a lot of pain management to do those. I know my limitations on things when it comes to physical work. I
mm,
don't do the things that I used to. I think for a lot of people that is the thing. Like you just wear your body out faster when you do physical work like that is
mm,
demanding on your joints and your body. So for me, no, I'm probably not living the life of a typical 40-year-old.
mm.
I can't run. I don't run. Um, I can do push-ups now, but I can't do a ton of them, without risking, probably some further injuries. And I know a lot of friends that are like that. It just takes a toll on you.
Mm. And have you considered that kind of stem cell therapy and the stem cell treatments, especially that they offer in the southern parts of North America?
I've recently I've looked into some different things because with the VA and American healthcare, there's a lot of things that are not approved that are approved overseas. And while they're catching up to some of these things, the American healthcare system is just a lot different than other countries. And they don't do things if it's for profit or if it's not for profit. And there's a whole political side to it. But I have looked into that a little bit. I'll be honest, I don't know to probably say one way or the other, but I've looked into different pain medicine treatments that are a little more experimental, and some other stuff. So yeah, I would love to learn more about stem cells and see what that can do, because I've heard that people like athletes have gone overseas and had the treatment done and it changed their completely healed their injury and did things that the American healthcare system won't let you do, but it actually works.
Okay. And when you retired out of active duty, what kind of career did you try to pursue then?
So I didn't really have, since it was kind of like last minute when I got out. I knew I was going through the medical board process, but I wasn't like 1000% sure what was going to happen. And then when I got my final verdict, I only had 45 days to leave. So in 45 days, I had to be out processed, basically. And then I could take terminal leave and all the other leaves and stuff like that if they were approved. But I didn't have like a career in mind, so I was just trying to find a job because I needed to take care of the family because it was a sole income at the time. So I took a job with an insurance and investment company, and I was going to go do that. But then after I signed on and I was doing some training remotely like this because I wasn't on active duty yet, and I was just trying to get some of my trainings stuff like that done. They kind of flaked on me and wouldn't reply back to emails. And then when they did, it was 2 or 3 weeks later, and I was like, I just didn't feel like a priority, so I went and looked for another job. And I found it, and then I sent them an email that said, hey, essentially, here's my notice. I'm quitting. I haven't gotten a response back to some of these things, and I have to start work here in a couple of weeks to take care of my family. So goodbye. So I took a job as a beer salesman. And I just slung beer at bars and restaurants and convenience stores, grocery stores, and all that for like 6 months before a job opened up on the local Air Force base, and I went to go do that in contracting.
Okay. And are you still currently doing that as well?
I still work for the base, but I don't do that. Now I've progressed into a higher paying job in data analytics, which is a little bit more in my nature of kind of problem solving. So if it fits me better than trying to do contracts, I don't really like talking contracts and numbers and figures and it's I don't really care for it too much. So data analytics is a like where I get to measure things, I get to apply algorithms and problem solving to help people, with their mission, their manpower needs, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And then what inspired you to start writing and be an author and to publish your books? What kind of sparked that fire inside you?
Well, as a kid, I was always very creative. We didn't have like a ton of money as I was growing up, so a lot of what I would do would be, came from the imagination. So I played outside a lot. I played in my mom's garden with a 1 gallon bucket of those cheap green plastic army men. So I had a wild imagination, and I like to draw a lot. So it was one of those things where I think it was just natural when I grew up that eventually I was going to do something a little more creative, whether it was professionally or just personally. And I decided to write a book because I had been highly recognized as a civilian in the government for my leadership. I had won several awards, and I just kind of felt like I had a lot of that knowledge to offer. So I said, I'm going to write a nonfiction book about leadership, and that's going to be my first book. If I can get that published, then eventually I'll write some other books, nonfiction and fiction, which I'm working on now. And I just said, I think as you get older, it's okay to have a little bit of a creative outlet, whatever it may be that you want to do. Some people like to go fishing and, they have different hobbies, woodworking, whatever it may be. Like I like to get outdoors too. I'm big into archery, but as a kid, I had to play oftentimes alone with very few toys and kind of make up my own stories and entertain myself. My parents were both working parents. They worked long hours to try to provide for us what they could, and I had to make do with what I had. And eventually, it got a little better. My parents, made a little bit more money, but I think that initial creativity was kind of ingrained in me that I carried on forever. And now telling stories and getting to write is kind of a creative outlet that I think, in a way, is almost a little therapeutic. Encourage a lot of other veterans to write as well. There's a therapy to it that I don't think people realize is there.
Okay, and then you mentioned you like archery. How's that on your back?
So I found that for me, it's about. I studied the actual mechanics of archery, and I listened to a lot of different professionals online, and I really looked at how you pull it back and how the rotation is in your shoulders and how you use your back muscles. There's a proper way to do it to where you can avoid injury. And
Hmm.
a lot of people will go out there and they'll get a bow and they don't care what it is and they'll just try to pull it back and it'll be too heavy for them and they'll put too much stress on the wrong parts of their back, their shoulders, or even their neck. Like you'll have bad posture. So I just really studied that and said, what is a proper way to do this to avoid injury? And I started at a really low weight and I didn't have a really heavy bow, nothing that was too
Hmm.
crazy. Um, I did a lot of exercise that was directly targeting the muscles that you use in archery. And I took my time, I allowed it to kind of come to me, and I built up the strength to do it. And I hunted with a crossbow for a long time because here in Oklahoma, where I live, crossbows are legal, especially if you have any kind of disability. So I hunted with a crossbow for a long time just so I could hunt, and it would be legal kills if I'd harvested any animals. It wouldn't kill them unethically or with a bad shot. Because I
Hmm.
just didn't trust myself with traditional archery yet. So I used it more as a hobby, as a chance to get outside, to develop some concentration, to focus on one thing, and it kind of helped with mental health and anxiety and a lot of different things. So that's what I used archery for, and I still use it for that today. Is more of a concentration thing, more of a time to get away and you focus on one thing, just pointing at a target, and been really beneficial. But yeah, on the health spectrum, I really concentrated on uh, how to do it properly to avoid further injury and to do it correctly.
Okay. And then you've mentioned now that you use it for the mental health kind of things, for the kind of anxiety things. Um, did you experience a lot of that when you've retired out of the service? Have you also kind of experienced a lot of veterans also experience a lot of PTSD? Is that something you've struggled with as well?
I've struggled with anxiety and depression, and I didn't know that until I was out for several years. And I was talking to a friend of mine online who I had met, a fellow veteran, and he mentioned something about. He's like, have you ever talked to anybody about this? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, you really should think about it because here's kind of some of the symptoms, and there's a lot of people who struggle with it. So I've talked to a VA doctor, and he kind of told me, like, he's like, yeah, these are some of the issues. So let's go through this program, this step-by-step program. And we talked about depression, we talked about anxiety. And when it came to injuries specifically and post-service trying to kind of get reacquainted with the world, and he's like, that's a tough thing to deal with, especially for a lot of veterans. So that's kind of what I dealt with was anxiety from getting back into society, dealing with my new injuries and my new lifestyle, and um, there's a lot of things I can't do like around the house. So I have to pay people to come over and fix things that I can fix myself. I can do that. I'm fully capable of doing it up here, but mentally and physically is a lot different. So physically, I can't do those things without killing myself. I'll be down on the couch for days because my back will be aching and killing me. I can't push a lawnmower. So I have to pay people to do those things, and that's an awful difficult thing to admit.
Hmm.
That you can no longer do it physically, but mentally you're telling yourself, absolutely, I can do that. So I struggled with it for a long time. I sought a lot of help. I got medicated, and I found that balance that really worked for me between medication and therapy, and kind of changing my habits around my life. I had to talk to my family about it a lot, and we just made changes. And that was the biggest part, was that the people around me needed to understand what I was dealing with,
Mm.
why I was feeling that way. And once I did all that, and I combined all those things, um, it was a really big deal, and it kind of changed things for the better.
Okay, now a lot of people, especially a lot of men, and I've mentioned that before in one of my podcasts, they don't want to admit that they they're not feeling well, that something's wrong, that they're kind of not. They try to be macho. They try to be always have the kind of the mask, or not trying to admit that things are going not as they should. And how did you say, okay, this is the steps I'm going to take. I'm not feeling well. Um, as you said, you've talked to a friend, but what kind of switched that thing in your mind that said, okay, I'm going to get help. I'm going to get out there, and it's obviously it's something that you can work with. It's something that you can deal with, and you can improve it a lot. And a lot of people don't want that. A lot of people don't want to accept that. What made that switch for you, and what kind of tips would you give to people that struggles with the same thing that you've struggled with?
So the doctor really said it to me. He said, you really need to take a moment and see how maybe you're lashing out at your family, and that you're taking out some of your frustrations on your family because of injuries and because of your past. And you don't know how to deal with it, so you're frustrated. And you've got to have an outlet somewhere. You need to find out where that outlet is, and he said that it is with your
Mm.
I kind of took a break from things, and I kind of looked at how how I was behaving, and I started paying people to do some of those things that I physically couldn't do anymore, but I was forcing myself to do. So instead of being cheap, I paid people to do those things, and I realized I was a happier person. I wasn't as frustrated. My body felt a little better. And I started eating right, started eating better, and trying to focus on the other side of physical health, without having to physically do a whole lot. And I just started feeling better. And a friend of mine said, that's probably where the problems are. And he's like, don't try to be macho, and don't try to be Mr. Badass about it or anything like that. And he's like, real men can admit when they're wrong, can admit that they need help, because their sole focus is on taking care of other people and not taking care of themselves. And that's when it really kind of hit me hard. And I was like, he's right. I got to admit some of these things, because I really don't care what other people think of me. I don't care if other people think I'm macho, if they think I'm a pansy because I went and got help, or talking to a counselor or whatever. I really don't care what anybody else thinks. But I do care what my wife and my kids think of me. And that's really important to me. And that's maybe the only thing that I actually give a damn about, is their opinion. So, for me, that was what kicked it all off. Was I could care less what anybody else thinks. Um, Now it's a little different. I do care what other people think, because when I tell them this story, I want it to inspire them. So I do care that people take something away from this. But in the beginning, I did not care at all. If people thought I looked like a wimp, or anything like that, I did not care. And I tell people that now. The cool thing to do is to go get help, and is to go be a better version of yourself, because there are people in the world who want to be around you, who want to love you, want to understand you, and don't hold back. Don't try to hide something. Don't try to be macho. Like, macho looks cool in the Hollywood movies, and that's, you
Mm.
know those badass people in life that look macho probably have a lot of ghosts in their closets and a lot of issues going on. But there's nothing more rewarding, more satisfying than taking care of yourself and taking care of your family and the people around you. That's, to me, is pretty macho. Like, I could care less what anybody else thinks, but family is really important.
Okay, and then y- your last sentence, your family is pretty important to you. Why is that? Why do you care so much about your family? Um, is it kind of thing that you were born with? You grow up with a good family, and you want to establish that further? Uh, why would you say family is so important to you?
Well, family is what's going to be there for you always. You're going to have friends. Friends come and go. Relationships come and go. Partnerships come and go. But once you find something with a true, genuine connection, in a partner and a spouse, um, that you have to work towards it to keep it, but it's the one thing that you can build upon, that can never go away if you don't let it. And I was raised in a household where my family didn't have a ton of money, but we did have family. So we spent a lot of time around family. And my grandpa was very old school, where um, the woman stayed at home. She cooked and cleaned. She took care of kids and stuff like that, but she stayed at home. But there was nobody in the house that was higher than, my grandma, than the female. So the men in the house, we were in charge or whatever, but we always took care of the females. So that's kind of how I grew up with the mentality of, you're the man of the house, but nobody is above the woman. She deserves all the respect. You can disrespect me all day long if you want to, but you do not disrespect, my spouse. And that's how my grandpa was. He's like, you can say whatever you want to me. You can try to hurt my feelings all you want to, but if you say a bad word to your grandmother, me and you are going to have a problem. So I just grew up like that, where I really respect the household dynamics and kind of that situation. So to me, it's really, really important to maintain that, to teach my kids that, so that they grow up and they're respectful of their spouses, whoever they may be, and they're respectful to other people, and that they understand the importance. Family's always going to be here for you. You can do almost no wrong in their eyes. They're going to conditionally be there for you. They might not agree with it. They might not like what you're doing, but they're not going to necessarily. I think that's really important to know that my kids have done stuff that I don't agree with and that I didn't like. I told them that, but then at the end of the day, I was still there for them to support them. And I think that's really important. Family is really, really important to me.
Okay. And you've mentioned now that you know that your kids know that even when they've done something wrong, even when they uh, didn't do as you've told them to do or anything like that, you were still there for supporting them. How important do you think that is for a child to grow up knowing that their parents are there, their father are there, that if there's a trouble, if there's a problem, you are there to help them out, no matter what the situation is.
Well, I've always taught my kids that, it's important to understand the role of a parent, because we're here to make sure you don't do anything that's wrong, you don't get into serious trouble, that you don't get in any kind of, safety issues. Your life was never threatened, that you grow up safe, you grow up smart. But at the same time, I would rather you be in trouble with me than in trouble with the law, or in trouble with, you're in the hospital because you did something stupid. By no means am I endorsing drinking underage, but you know what? Almost every kid in America is tempted to do it at some point in time. Um, I don't want you to do it, but if for some reason you do it, I would rather you would call me and tell me that you did it and that you knew I'm going to be mad, but know that I'm going to come get you. I'm going to come bring you home safely. You might get a lecture the entire time, and I might be pretty mad at you, but you're not in a hospital. You're not under arrest. You didn't get behind the wheel of a car and cause a wreck and kill someone. A million bad things can happen from that. But if the worst thing to happen to you is me coming and picking you up and giving you a lecture, maybe grounding you, taking away your phone, that's better than the alternative. So to try to apply common sense, don't put yourself in the situations that might get you there. And be smart about things. If you're going to make a dumb decision, do it as smart as possible. It's easy to sit there and say, don't do that. And then what do your kids want to do? Well, they don't want to listen to you. They want to be defiant. And every kid wants to a degree. So instead of stomping your fists and, stomping your feet and banging your fists and saying, don't do this or else I'm going to just hammer you. It's like, I don't want you to do it. I don't suggest you do it. It's not legal, blah, 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 explaining to them all the consequences, but saying, you know what, I should be your first phone call if you get into any kind of trouble, because I'd rather you be in trouble with me than in trouble with someone else.
Mm. And then if something like that happens, do you feel appreciated? Do you feel that you kind of like you've done your job correctly? If a situation like that occurs, or something similar, that you've done your job, you're the one that your child is going to call. You're the one they look up to, and they know if there's something they can call you, and then they did, and then obviously you've done something correctly. Does that kind of give you some kind of satisfaction, some kind of thing that says, okay, I've done this correctly. Um, this is a box
Yeah, it definitely
authentic,
gives
something like
me
that.
like a yeah, it definitely gives me like a sense of relief and kind of that
Mm,
um, you definitely feel like you've done something right and that your kids maybe do listen to you more often than you think they do. Um, I don't really care about it being like feeling appreciated because that's not. I don't want all the glitz and glams and glory of being a parent. I want to be an effective one, and I want my kids to grow up and be good humans. And I think that's more important to me. But it definitely gives you a sense of satisfaction and kind of easiness knowing like, okay, they listen to me more often than I think they do, and they actually call me. That means they trust me to a degree, and that's important because the minute you lose someone's trust, it's really hard to get it back. So if they trust me unconditionally enough to call me in their worst moment, um, that's pretty special.
mm. You've now mentioned the big word, and that's the word trust. How important do you think trust is in relationships? I'm not talking about in a relationship in specific, but in relationships as general. Trust people in your life, to have people that you can trust and people that trust you, and kind of that mutual trust, especially if you want to go forward in life, especially with the people around you.
Yeah. So trust is a hard thing to gain and an easy thing to lose. And once you trust people, you want to be able to trust them unconditionally without constantly like looking over your shoulder or checking back in. Um, but the minute you have to is the minute you start to question things. Whether you question yourself, you question them, you start to question a lot of things, and that can be unhealthy and that can be dangerous. Um, so you want to build trust, and you want to trust people. And for me, trust is important because then it allows you to be your authentic self and it allows you to do things safely. So whether it's trusting people in the work center and the people you work with, or it's trusting your family, um, you want to know when you say something, it's kind of the truth. It's the truth. Everybody heard it. What they're going to do after that, what's what you told them, or what you said is going to be authentic and real. And you don't want to ever have to question that. And same thing with vice versa. When somebody says something to you, you don't want to question it. You want to hear it for what it is and go, okay, that's what they said. This is what they mean. Whatever it is, and it's authentic. And I think that's where trust and the truth kind of comes from. Um, like I said, trust is a hard thing to earn and an easy thing to lose.
Mm. You've mentioned now another thing, and that is being your authentic self. How important do you think is that to be your authentic self, and especially in today's day and age, where I don't think a lot of people are being their authentic selves. They are having kind of front, trying to be somebody that they're not. How important do you think that is, especially today?
Well, I think people should chase the community and not chase followers and likes because um, those people who have millions of followers on Instagram or Facebook and all that, those people are following you because of what you show them. And oftentimes what you show them is the glamorous side of your life. And they don't know the struggles. They don't know who you really are as an individual. Um, and you don't ever show them that. So people don't know the authentic you. They just know a version of you. And I think it's more important to be your authentic self and have genuine connections. I would rather have 1,000 followers on Instagram, all of whom are people who know me and will support me in my endeavors and trust me and have a good relationship with me than have 1,000,000 followers, 999,999 of them who are all strangers,
Mm.
who just follow me for the sake of following me because I look cool or whatever that may be. So I think it's important to chase the community that you want to be a part of as opposed to chasing followers. Your authentic self is the best version of you. You can put out whatever version of you you want on social media. You can look as cool as you want to. You can impress however many people you want to, but that does not mean you have relationships and friendships in your life. That just means you have people that are clicking a button and scrolling past you. You're nothing but a memory a second later.
Mm. Okay, and then why do you think people put this kind of front forward, not being their authentic self, being somebody that they are not really, or showing people that they are somebody else. Why do you think people do that? Do you think it is just for the sake of being accepted, being liked,
Yeah, I think it's
maybe
the
something
world we
else?
live in is kind of that instant gratification. People want to feel they constantly want to have that pat on their shoulder, that slap on the back, that good boy, that you're doing great, you look awesome. Um, it's a different time now. They want to have that constant praise, that constant love. And it's different than when I grew up, where you had to work on it, and respect was earned and gained, and sometimes it took a long time. It wasn't instant. I wasn't sure if my grandpa and my dad liked me for a lot of my childhood. And it wasn't because they didn't like me, it's because they were constantly pushing me harder to be better. And if I ever got to a point where I was okay with them saying good job to me, then what meant I was going to work harder for it the next day? I had already been told. I had already gotten that satisfaction. So, and that reward. So you got to stay hungry to a degree. And I think that's important too. I think nowadays it's a little different. They want that immediate satisfaction, that immediate reward of feeling awesome, feeling good. But like that's a temporary high, like getting approval from the people around you who actually matter something to you. That's a long term high that stays with you forever. But getting likes and follows on social media, or having people who just like you, it's temporary. It's a temporary high. But then you have to constantly get it over and over again because it wears off. So I think it's just a culture. The world we live in today is an instant gratification kind of world, and there's shorter attention spans. And I just think it just is what it is. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's different. And I think that's just kind of the difference between generations.
Do you think that this kind of thing will improve as you mentioned, the instant gratification, the not trying to work that hard for the approval? Do you think that will ever change again? Do you think that will improve? Do you think that people will maybe see the light, that this is not actual, as you mentioned, it's not that kind of deep feeling inside of you. It's just sitting is just how, and you get over it. Do you think it will change sometime?
Yeah, I think the people we're talking about are like 1% of the population that actually do that. The social media influencers, the celebrities, stuff like that. They're the 1% of the population that has to have that. The real genuine people who don't need that aren't showing off on social media necessarily. So um, I think that as a world, we'll come full circle eventually, and things will change. And um, I think with each generation, different things are changing our culture and our environment. And I think eventually it will. I think some of that stuff will wear off. But I also think it's as people mature, I think they'll realize that they don't need that in order to be successful in life. So some of that stuff will start to tailor off. Like you don't need millions of people telling you that you're doing a good job, when you can see the fruits of your labor over here. Like I am doing a good job because I'm getting this paycheck, or I'm getting this, or I'm getting that. I don't necessarily need those likes and those views to, solidify or give the stamp of approval.
Okay, and then I think we're on a good note now. Before I stop recording, will you just tell me where can people find you? Where can people reach out to you? Where can people listen to you as well? Just give me all of your links, all of your handles.
Yeah, so you can go to jeffclarkofficial.com. That's my website. And on my website, it has my social media, it has some podcast info. You can find my podcast, Course of Action, on all the major platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple. My listeners really like Apple Podcasts, so please go check in there. Give it a like, give it a follow, give it a review if you want to. Subscribe to get the newest episodes. Just know that I appreciate people who listen. And I did the podcast for people who listen and people who want to appreciate the guests and the conversations. So I just appreciate anybody tuning in, and I hope they enjoy it. But yeah, jeffclarkofficial.com is the main place to go.
Okay, perfect. Then I'm going to stop recording just now.